it's going to throw everything on its head. It's going to throw the religions of the world on their head and stuff like that. And we see
Right.
how the attempts are being made to either incorporate or to, just completely disprove these religions. It is the beauty of postmodernism, and I think that it has a lot to do with a connection between the way that information cycles in postmodern society, the way that cybernetics influence the flow of information, and that we're all kind of nodes on the informational network, as opposed to like something like, television being this like one directional information source. I think this kind of oddly connects to the idea of the collective unconscious too, and the way that Freud had said to Jung that when he spoke about this concept, that it would create like a wellspring of the occult, or like a return of the occult or something like that, and superstition. And either way, like the kind of loss of centrality in media, I think, like has opened the door for the most fringe speculative thinking, whether it's conspiratorial or occult, or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, the medium is the message, right? Like, so I think a lot of what we see right now is just like artifacts produced by the shape that our media takes. So I think a lot of the response to the UFO thing just has to do with like the shape of our social media like systems at the moment. So the most outlandish and novel or infuriating kind of interpretations will take the lead. And I think that's how something like that, like non-issue of like the woman on the plane, gains so much like power because it's like an attractive-ish woman, like creating a situation of like uncertainty, and everyone wants to know like what's going on. So I think the shape that this current like wave of UFO things is taking has to do with like how the information is being disseminated, namely like these sort of like event like situations where it's like we're all kind of like on our toes, like waiting for like the next like thing. So it's like if it's a hearing, or it's like, oh, these like indigenous people in Peru are defending against like green goblin aliens, like it's like these sort of almost like waves coming in from the ocean, and like every time it breaks as like, oh, it's just nothing, it's a fraud, or like it's a hoax, or it's misunderstood, or it's like nothing.
Yeah.
So I think we're seeing this like weird, we're like the UFO thing is like showing us the shape of our culture at the moment in this kind of interesting way. We're like seeing what our society looks like, at least this one that we live in at the moment, like this Western sort of global village-ish weird like internet mediated society is kind of we're kind of seeing the shadow shape of it through this thing. And even if that's all this UFO thing is like an artifact of this mutating network that we live in, that's interesting enough. Like, part of me thinks that it might not even matter that it's UFOs. Like, that might just be like an arbitrary point, and that like I just happen to be interested in UFOs like as a person, and so I take it. And like all these other people who are being kind of like infected by the meme too, right? Like people taking these really hard stances online and stuff, like, which I've tried very hard not to do. But people ask me all the time, like, well, what do you think about this? As I'm sure you get too. And so, yeah, I think it might just be like, I don't know, it happened to be UFOs because they're so amorphous and useful for several different areas, but I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that's where it gets odd, and it feels almost initiatory, because, if you get just below the surface, it really seems to have less and less to do with UFOs.
Yeah.
And I think one of those interesting things is Lou Elizondo you know, referring the book Chains of the Sea, which you read,
Yeah.
to interested parties. And that kind of like, it reminds me of the way that like Nema and the Bait Cabal and even Bertio, a lot of their rituals, oddly, like they referred to them as like time travel rituals and stuff like that.
Mm.
But it seems like this other, the entity that we're building, you know, the shape of this other entity, the alien or whatever, that we've been constructing in all these different ways. It's like these all seem like attempts to bring this thing into existence, you know. And even I think that, you know, you can switch that lens to see Lou Elizondo kind of on that side of it, you know, where like the things that he's saying are less of a call to arms and more of like, you know, this conjuration of creating this golem and like vectorizing this golem into reality, you know, this form of non-human intelligence, and this kind of invasion, you know, like.
Right. Well, that's why the Chains of the Sea reference is so interesting. And I mean, it's kind of like, yeah, having read it, it's kind of like a classic sci-fi story to a certain extent. And I remember like a couple episodes ago, I was mentioning how like I don't think of UFOs and science fiction as like at all related, but of course that's not true, because they are. But I guess I meant more like one of them seems to have a spiritual impulse and the other seems to be more pure invention, but I don't think that's a legitimate distinction. Anyway, Chains of the Sea, like, it's sort of set up as like, so it's interesting in our moment because it has these 3 or so like key points of like the way these UFOs appear and the way that they come to Earth feels very kind of similar to like what we're seeing now, like these sort of smooth, more or less featureless objects mysteriously coming to Earth. And then these like kind of shockingly apropos lines about like an AI nuclear World War III.